Hello, Assalamualaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Dental Talk. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Bakhtawar Azhar here with us. Dr. Bakhtawar grew up in Rawalpindi. She moved to Lahore for her undergraduate in dentistry from De.Mont. She is currently pursuing her postgraduate at the Howard T.A. Chan School of Public Health, where she is doing MPH in Global Health. Before moving to the US, she was working with the Infection Prevention and Control Foundation as a program manager for the programs of Safe Dentistry. Thank you so much, Dr. Bakhtawar, for joining us today. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for taking time out.
Thank you so much, Ghulam, for having me. And I've been looking forward to doing this podcast. I'm happy that we're finally doing this.
Yeah, I'm also very excited for this because I don't get to talk to someone studying at Harvard every day, so I'm pretty excited. Mashallah. All right, so
Well,
with your permission, should we start the interview?
yeah, sure. Let's jump right into it.
All right, perfect. So हम आपको थोड़ा पीछे लेके जाएंगे. Tell us
Okay.
briefly how you got into dentistry. Was it always a choice that you like आपकी मर्जी से आप आई dentistry में? And how was that journey through dental school? And also tell me something that I really wanted to ask. You moved from Pindi to Lahore to study at De.Mont. How was that experience as well?
Oh, wow. Those are some really interesting questions. So I unfortunately I don't have like a very inspirational story towards how
That's
I ended
fine.
up at De.Mont or how I got into dentistry at all. It's actually it's not inspirational, but it's interesting. So ever since I was a little kid,
Mhm.
I always just quote unquote wanted to be cool, so to say, and I always wanted to be a fashion designer. But I
Oh,
had like one of the most typical dads who was like, either you're going to be a doctor or you're going to be an engineer, and there is no question, right?
okay.
Like, जो पाकिस्तान का stand है कि भाई, if
Yeah,
you're not a doctor or an engineer, आप जिंदगी में कुछ नहीं कर सकते.
I
So
agree.
I had this growing up. I had this deal with my dad. He's like, you only say you want to be a fashion designer because you cannot get into a medical school because it's hard. And I'm like, that's not facts. Like मैं class में first आती हूँ, मेरे grades बहुत अच्छे आते थे. I was like good at school. So I was like, you can't say that to me. He's like, okay, so let's do this. You get into a medical school, और मैं खुद तुम्हें fashion designing school छोड़ के आऊँगा.
Oh my God. I feel like
I
you're
was
telling
like,
me my story because I wanted to do international relations, political sciences, and my father said the same thing. You can do dentistry right now, and then I'll get you into LUMS, and you can do
yeah.
political sciences later on. Okay, anyway, sorry to cut you off. You can.
That's just brown parents. And I was like, okay, so I was like, okay, so at the back of my head, I knew I'm either gonna like go towards pre-engineering or pre-medical in my FSC because I had very early on decided that I was gonna do metric and not O levels. So I'm from Roots, and Roots में grade 6 में you have to decide whether you want to do O levels or metric. And we knew, like, we had that understanding कि आपको medical school में घुसने के लिए या engineering school में घुसने के लिए it's going to be beneficial if you do metric and FSC. So
Yeah.
I went the metric FSC route. फिर मैंने मेट्रिक किया. मेट्रिक में मैंने डिसाइड किया कि okay, I'm going to do pre-med in FSC की pre-med, and then I just randomly started applying to all of the medical schools, through the MCAT process. But at the same time, I was applying for BBA programs in NAST. I think I wanted to apply for LUMS the next year, but इससे पहले मेरा हो गया था already admission. My initial, obviously, priority was to get into MBBS, but the way I sort of prioritized was like Pindi ke medical schools, Rawalpindi Medical College, then Lahore ke medical schools, and then Lahore ka dentistry school. Because I was like, I can either be in Pindi or I would want to be at
Yeah.
Lahore. And then the way the merit list came out, I ended up at De.Mont. And I was like, and by this point, I think I'd really grown out of my wanting to be a fashion designer because I realized that that wasn't an education that I wanted to pursue. So I was like, if I want to do fashion designing at some point, I'll just do it like as a side hustle.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, maybe we want a career that, I think I had gotten very practical at that point in my age. Like I wanted a career that would also sort of pay off
Yeah.
and give me some sort of financial security. So I was like, okay, dentistry. I was happy about dentistry because I was never too sold on the idea of being a doctor. I did not want my profession to be my entire life. So I was like, okay, dentistry sounds cool, like good work-life balance, and
Yeah.
but still sort of a doctor. So why not? So I then realized that I will have to move to Lahore, and it was honestly a bit of a it wasn't something that I had anticipated. I really thought I would end up at RMC because I like my merit according to the previous batches had been fine. So but
Okay.
my year, like the merit was like not according to what it had been in the past few years. I was like, okay. So I moved to Lahore. I moved to De.Mont, and it was not easy. It
I'm
was
sure.
It was a huge cultural shock. It was just
Were you a hostelite or a day scholar?
I was a hostelite.
Oh
I
my.
moved on my own. So I lived in Hassan Raza hostel, and it's not the best place to
Yeah,
live.
I
It's
know,
right
I know, I know,
in
I
an
know.
artery.
I've heard, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
hats
so
off.
yeah, so it was like right in the middle of an artery, right in the middle of that
Yeah.
really busy bazaar. और बस रश है और रिक्शे हैं और उस बेचारे हॉस्टल की बहुत बुरी हालत है. And when my parents were going to drop me off, my mother was not. Like when she was dropping me off, she's like, will you be able to stay here? And my dad was like, she will stay here. Like, what do you mean? What's that question? And my dad is like, no bullshit. Like, बिल्कुल, कि कोई बच्चों को बिगाड़ने की जरूरत नहीं है रहने की
And
यहाँ पे. And because he himself in his life has pulled himself out of, my dad is from a village and he moved from, so he's from Chukwal. So I'm like, I have family like roots from Chukwal.
okay.
And so my dad and his family like moved out of the village, came to Pindi, settled there. So my dad's done the struggle, so none of these things phase him. But my mother has a bit of a different background, so it's always like, ye kaise hoga? Uh, but it was interesting. I just stayed at Hassan Raza, and I think what really helped initially, I was very scared. I didn't think that I would be able to do it. मैं इसी mindset से गई थी कि मैं एक week रहूंगी because I didn't want my parents to think I didn't try. And I was like, in the meanwhile, I'll apply for LUMS. कभी भी है मेरा आराम से हो जाएगा, and I'll just move to LUMS. But then, first week of my school, I met some amazing friends. I made amazing friends, and I was
First
like,
week?
I the first the first week the first one of them was the first day and
Right.
the other was the first week and we're still like super tight
Oh,
and
that's great because first week wale friends usually friends nahi rehte by the end of college. So that's a very big
Gulam,
pickup.
Gulam, you can we can have a kind of conversation. You can edit it as much as you want around how much you think it's relevant for the podcast. But no, do like those friends I've made. I think they helped me. We were living in not the most ideal conditions, but again, if I look back at my life, I don't think I've. That was one of the happiest moments of my life, just because of how organic and just how effortless that friendship was,
Oh my
and it
God,
was
I
really
completely
special.
I completely relate with this because मैं if anyone asks me कि आपका CMH का experience अच्छा क्यों because I loved my 5 साल जो मैंने CMH में गुजारे हैं and I always say it's only because of my friends because oh my like I completely relate what you're saying. So I'm assuming
I think
because you made great friends, you had an amazing 5 years at De.Mont and all right, so you've graduated. You stayed in Pakistan post BDS. You worked for a private practice. You worked as a demonstrator and you worked as a program manager at IPAC. How was
yeah.
that discovering phase post BDS? Because वो एक बड़ा मुश्किल साल एक साल होता है 6 महीने होते हैं after a house job. It's very difficult because you don't know
Yeah,
what to do. You have opportunities, you don't have opportunities. How was that post BDS phase for you?
it's a very good question. So honestly, was the time after graduation was very difficult. It got really difficult for me after a certain point. So when I was in
Did you
my
move
final,
back to Pindi after graduating?
no, so my family actually moved to Lahore during my final year. So
Okay.
my sister had moved abroad, my brother had moved to Karachi, and my parents were living in Delhi. So they just moved to Lahore for me because they thought it'd be convenient. And I had told my parents that because I've spent 4 years in Lahore, I don't think I'll be able to progress as much back in Pindi
Yeah.
as I would in Lahore because I had made, I knew all the professors there,
Connections. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
all my work opportunities were there, so I wanted to stay in Lahore. So both my parents, they were kind enough because they both worked in other cities as well. So they were traveling anyways from Pindi. So they were like, we'll travel from Lahore. It's
Perfect.
fine for us. So they just moved to Lahore for me. And so they moved during final year. So during my and towards the end of my final year, I moved from Hassan Raza to live with my family. And so okay, so during my final year is when I decided that I wanted to do BDS after my BDS, and that was something that I was very laser focused on. I was like, I'm gonna get my dental boards out of the way during my house job, and I'm gonna like apply for my DDS like right after my house job ends, and I should be in a program by that. I don't want to waste any time. I'm not gonna waste a second of my life, and by 27, I'm gonna be like Bakhtavar as a BDS DDS on my way to. And unfortunately, that's not how life works.
Let me
So
guess, COVID happened or not?
no,
Oh
I,
no,
I
you graduated in 2016. Sorry,
so
never
I
mind.
was yeah. So I was doing my house job. In my house, it started in 2017 May.
Okay.
And I was okay. So I was preparing for my NBD part one. And I'm like, okay, I've booked my exam. I have everything in place. I go to take my student, my visit visa interview. Rejected my visit
Oh
visa.
my God.
And this was the first time I was applying for a US visa. And I hadn't traveled to the US before this. And I was like, what? Like, oh, 2019, I got into a bit of an existential crisis because I just didn't know what to do. I was very depressed about thinking of building a future in Pakistan because I didn't want to, honestly. And that's just something that I hadn't thought about. But I did obviously now start, like I had to think about it. So
Absolutely.
I was a bit of a mess trying to do everything. I was like, okay, maybe I need to take my part one, the worst time of my life. Um, and in that moment, I think through that, like I took my part one, I signed up for my MDS exam, which I don't think I ended up taking, or did I? I don't even remember. I was like, okay, now I need a job. By this time, I had stopped working at Ideal Smile. So when I was going to go travel, I just like stopped working for a bit as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I need a job. So I started trying to get a demoship because that's this job you can get, as somebody out of dental school.
Mhm.
And that process was excruciating. Like finding a demoship in
Oh my
Pakistan.
God. I'm working as a demo right now, so I know.
You know what the process
Yeah.
is. There is no, you don't send in your resume. There is no merit list. There is no criteria. You need to know the right people. You need to know somebody who's going to
I,
give the
I,
cleaner call.
if we ever talk in detail, I'll tell you about the story of how I got a demo.
We can definitely chat once this recording is
Yeah, no,
over and
definitely we will. We will.
we can be even more candid. But
Yeah.
then and I felt so bad about it because I always felt like, that okay, my competence is going to get me, places in life. And this was the one point where I was like, oh no, I'm gonna need to have connections, and not in a good way. Like I just need to know the right people to be able
Yeah.
to do
It's
sort of.
very depressing. It really frustrates you that you're not. It really frustrated. What really frustrated me was I was Alhamdulillah, one of the best graduates of CMH of my batch, and
Yeah.
I did not get you cannot get a demoship in CMH. It's so difficult to get a demoship in CMH. But yeah, it really frustrates you. I
Anywhere,
completely understand.
honestly, I applied to all universities in
Yeah.
Lahore that I knew of, all places where my friends were working. Everybody who was working as a demo would be like, yeah, this is how you become a demo. You need to know someone who will call someone, then who will say something to someone, and then you pull all the strings that you
Yeah.
can. And I was like, okay, that's what it takes. So I actually ended up at CPMC,
Yeah. Certain part.
Park Medical College. It doesn't have a dental wing, but I had a better connection there.
Yeah.
And I ended up teaching as a demo to second year medical students. Actually, I was an anatomy demo, and
Yeah.
it was again an interesting journey because I think that demoship really helped me see how much I enjoy teaching, and the fact that I'm actually good at it.
Yeah.
Uh, the students loved me. They did this sort of survey after a certain exam of theirs, and they really rated me high. And how I know that is that like I was having this meeting with the principal, and he's like, students really rated you well. Like, what do you do? And I was like, yeah, I pour my heart into it while
Yeah.
I'm at it because like it wasn't too long ago that we were students, and I know like how you can actually really develop interest for a certain subject just
Exactly.
based on the person that
You're so right. You're so right.
that you
Because even my students are like कि हमें डेमोस की ज़्यादा समझ आती है
yeah
प्रोफेसर्स से क्योंकि
yeah
प्रोफेसर्स एक बहुत अच्छा पढ़ाते होंगे मतलब उनको नॉलेज ज़्यादा होती है मगर हमें पता होता है कि बताना क्या है और किस तरह
yeah
बताना है आई फील सो
yeah
you're right I completely get it
yeah.
और
So
all right, so we've talked about anatomy demoship. I want to talk about IPAC. You were the program manager at IPAC. What was your
yes,
job description? How you got that job? I believe it's an American startup that you started working for, or an
yeah,
American.
and then,
It has
so
something to do with America. So just tell me a bit about that.
okay, so I'll tell you how I got into it to begin with. So during my demoship, I also again then went back to Ideal Smile. I started working as an associate at Ideal Smile. They were opening this new branch in Gulberg Galleria.
Yeah,
So I was sent there. So it was actually Dr. Akim Mudassir, the guy that I was working with.
yeah,
He got involved in infection control. Dr. Akim Mudassir himself is always interested in infection control, and I always
yeah,
enjoyed, like, we would always talk about, how infection control in Pakistan is not really in a good place, what we can do about it, this and that. And then he got involved with Professor Dr. Samir Shafi. So Dr. Samir Shafi is a nephrologist in Chicago in the US. So he's a King Edward graduate who then moved to the US and he's been working as a doctor. And he has this chain of dialysis centers in the US.
Okay.
And he started a nonprofit organization in Pakistan by the name of Infection Prevention and Control Foundation. What they do is they're essentially a volunteer force of medical and dental students who advocate for the prevention of spread of diseases like hepatitis. So they basically focus on communicable diseases and the prevention of spread of communicable diseases in Pakistan. So initially they were just like a student body, a volunteer force, and then I think around in 2019 they sort of established themselves as a non-profit organization. So it was actually, so I was involved with the volunteer force at some point, but not as officially as I did when I started working, particularly on the infection prevention and control in dentistry part of it, where we actually set the foundation of
Right. Yeah, no, I get that.
the safety. So when Dr. Akib and Dr. Samir Shafi started working, collaborating together on this project of this, so they're like, we don't have anything that focuses on dentistry really. And then so me and Dr. Akib, we started talking about it, like, oh, what can we do about it? And then one thing led to another. We initially started off with creating awareness about infection prevention and control in dentistry. And then eventually we thought that, establishing a whole, like a whole separate program for it would be nice. And they needed to hire somebody who was going to work sort of full time on the project. And because I was doing my clinical and because I was, still like, oh, I don't know, I'm not too sure if I want to like involve myself full time in this, I just volunteered for it still. Like I didn't have a job for it. I would just, like voluntarily do that work because it was close to my heart and I really enjoyed it. And then COVID happened. So while we were in the initial phases of like doing that work, COVID happened. Clinics were shut down. I wasn't doing clinical work and they were still looking for a person that they wanted as a program manager for that program. Yeah. And so like, to do it, and I was like, sure. And that's how I got hired by the Infection Prevention and Control Foundation as the program manager for the program of safe dentistry.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty brilliant story. All right, so फिर IPAC के जब आप program manager बन गई, तो I guess you worked as the program manager for a year?
Yes. So I started working with them casually around 2019, and then I think 2020 onwards, I've been working with them. And then yeah.
All right, perfect. So we've discussed your life pre applying to public health. Now we'll come to SOFAS and applying to public health. How ये public health ka, what made you choose this path of? I'm assuming, knowing what you've told me, I'm assuming that it was a way to get into get a visa or get into the American education system. So
yes,
is that the reason, and how did you go about it? What was the thought process behind applying to public health?
So honestly, 2019, I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career. Now I was doing jobs, but at the same time, at the back of my head, I was like, oh, what's my bigger career goal? How do I want to like do this? Again, I didn't want to let go of DDS completely. I was like, I'm gonna get there. I just have to see what are my other options of getting there. I remember very early on, my brother was like, just take the GRE, apply for an MPH. But I'm the sort of a person, I cannot do something unless and until I'm really doing it well. Like, I cannot just casually do whatever. Like, I'm just not that person. So it didn't make sense to me at that time. And then I got involved with this IPAC and I really enjoyed that work. And I realized that I had a bit of a natural knack for, like administrative course and sort of doing that sort of work. And then I was like, oh, what do I? And so when I remember when like I used to be in meetings with Dr. Samir Shafi and Dr. Umar Farooq, these are all people with the board of the Infection Prevention and Control Foundation. They're all in the US. They were great people. They mentored me a lot. They gave me a lot of confidence to sort of do a lot of work that I thought I maybe wasn't capable of, because like a young girl right out of school, like, what do I know? And they're like, no, you know more than you think, and, you have to take charge at times. Yeah. And I think when I would be having these conversations with them, a lot of times I realized that I lacked the vocabulary to talk public health, I didn't have a lot of understanding of how public health works. How do you look at public health related problems and move from those problems to solutions? A lot of times I felt like a lot of things that I was trying to look at, I didn't have the data to sort of base any policy that I was going to suggest to this. So these people would be like from the foundation had a very close association with the Punjab Healthcare Commission, and they would have these meetings with Punjab Healthcare Commissions to look at what are some of the things that the non-profit can do to help the Punjab Healthcare Commission, achieve their healthcare goals and all of that. And that's how NGOs work in Pakistan, right? And so I thought that, and I wanted to learn the art of dealing with public health problems, and as a healthcare professional, I really wanted to become someone who can be like, oh, this is a public health matter. I'm a health professional, but I want to be a public health professional as well, who can help you go from problem identifying to problem solution, and research and evidence in between. And that is when I got interested in public health. And I was like, oh, and I felt like in that moment, everything started falling into place. I was like, oh, I could do an MPH and I could then do a DDS. So I could be an MPH and a DDS. So I was like, oh, this makes sense. Oh my God. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be cautious. I'm not going to attach myself to another goal and I'm just going to have an open mind, apply for it, and we'll see where this goes. And so then in 2020, I think I was very caught up with being the program manager and dealing, because it was like we set the foundation of it, and it was very rocky in the beginning. Like there were a lot of challenges that we had to face, and we didn't have a large team. We literally had a team of 2 people which then turned into a team of 3 people. So it was me, and then we had Nimra Faisal, who was the coordinator, and that's it. Like we were a team of 2 people with Dr. Akib sort of supervising, but we were doing all the groundwork all the time. So it was a lot. So 2020, I was completely occupied by the program itself. And then towards the end of 2020, I was like, okay, I need to focus on my long-term career goals as well and start applying. So that's when I started looking into SOFAs and, what the process of application of sending applications for an MPH in the US are. So that's end of 2020 is where it started.
When you started applying. All right, that's perfect. All right, आपने अब decide कर लिया कि आपने apply करना है. वो आपने यूनिवर्सिटीज़ कौन सी शॉर्टलिस्ट की? एंड आई नो सोफास SOPHAS एक वो कॉमन ऐप है जिसके थ्रू आप अप्लाई करते हैं. आपने यूनिवर्सिटीज़ कौन सी शॉर्टलिस्ट की? व्हाट वाज योर गोल कि आपने कौन सी यूनिवर्सिटी में घुसना है? हर बंदे का गोल यही होता है हार्वर्ड में घुसना है, बट मतलब आपने क्या गोल सेट्स किया? आपने गोल्स क्या सेट किया? आपने मतलब हाउ डिड यू गो अबाउट इट वंस यू स्टार्टेड अप्लाइंग?
पहली तो बात, मेरा कोई गोल नहीं था हार्वर्ड. इट वाज अ वेरी फार फेच. आई वाज लाइक Harvard, Johns Hopkins, तो मैं सोच ही नहीं रही. I was like, any university would do. I just need an MBA. Anybody will accept.
Just for the audience, Dr. Bakhtavar also got into Johns Hopkins, which is just, by the way, either it's the first best or the second best. It's either of the two. Harvard first best है या Harvard second best है. Sorry?
It's Johns Hopkins and then Harvard.
Alright, so it's Johns Hopkins and Harvard. So मेरे दिमाग में Harvard is number 1. Johns Hopkins number 3 करता रहे. But Harvard है, Johns Hopkins को कौन जानता है? But
the reason I ended up coming here and not Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, but exactly. Anyway, alright, so you started applying. How did you go about that process?
So initially, I was again very lost. I did not even know where to begin. So what I did was I reached out to all of the DDS people I knew in the US. If anybody had an MPH before, I tried to reach out to as many people as I could through professors. कुछ professors के बच्चे US में dentistry practice कर रहे हैं. So I spoke to 5-6 people who were in the US. Some of them did have MPH backgrounds. And उन्होंने मुझे थोड़ी leads इसी तरह दी ना कि ये process से apply करने का. By that time, honestly, I had missed most deadlines because मैंने December में देखना शुरू किया था. December तक सब deadlines बंद हो जाती हैं. I was like, okay, at least I know अगले साल के लिए मैं prepared. So I shortlisted, I think 10 universities. Yeah. So the way I made my list was okay, easy, 3 easiest universities to get into, 3 easier universities, less competitive, and then the top 3 most competitive universities to get into. And the way I did was just your US, use just any rating of an MPH in the US and go through that list and just shortlist your universities. Again, I had my own preferences. My sister lives in New York, so some of my universities were New York based because it would save me a lot of living expenses. But then I really applied to all universities. So the universities that I ended up actually applying to were Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Columbia, Emory. These are top universities. Top universities, yeah. Boston University also comes under the top 10 universities for an MPH. So I did apply to that as well. Then I applied to Temple University, and two state universities in New York, CUNY and SUNY.
Alright, that's
Yeah,
perfect. मगर इसमें आपने ये भी was this a thought कि आपने उस यूनिवर्सिटी में MPH भी अप्लाई करना है जहाँ पे बाद में एडवांस स्टैंडिंग प्रोग्राम्स भी होते हैं जैसे हार्वर्ड में नहीं होता बट ये
yeah.
you probably would have applied to Boston because Boston का भी DDS प्रोग्राम है and
Honestly,
or
yeah, that's a good question. I think the reason I did apply to Boston and Temple University was this because both of them did have an advanced standing
yeah
after. Yeah, yeah,
right
that's the
चले perfect अच्छा आपने now there are two जब मैं किसी से पूछता हूँ तो वो ये कहते हैं कि there are three aspects of applying to America. First is your resume, your what you've done. Second is
yeah,
your GPA, and the third is your SOPs and your essays. All right, that's what I believe. जहाँ तक मुझे पता है. All right. अच्छा
yeah,
जीपीए का तो आप कुछ नहीं कर सकते वो तो आपका अंडरग्रेड में हो गया वो अपने वेस्ट के थ्रू WES जो है उसके थ्रू आपने अपनी
yeah.
इक्विपमेंट करवानी है राइट. How did you go about writing your SOPs? Now, SOPs, it's so difficult. I don't know how people write it. It is one of the most difficult things one
Yeah.
has to do. How did you go about writing your SOP?
So somebody gave me a really good advice when I was talking to them about how do I approach my essays. They were like, write a first draft. It's going to be nothing like your last draft, but just write a first draft, and you're going to go through 30 different drafts until you get to that final. And I think that was a very good advice because I was just because you have this fear that, oh, my SOP needs to be like my SOP needs to be so perfect.
Mhm.
That was really holding me back from writing anything at all because I was like, ye main kya gande mujhe to likhna nahi aata. And obviously, like doing BDS, we don't get a lot of practice of,
Yeah,
we're not very skilled writers. So
yeah,
I was like, oh, where do I even begin? So फिर मैंने बहुत गंदे गंदे drafts लिखना शुरू किया. ठीक है, I just started putting. I was like, okay, this is something that's close to my heart, right? Like I have done public health work that is close to my heart, and I think
right.
anything that you write that comes from a place of genuine intention always will show through your writing. It doesn't have to be great. I mean, it has to be great writing, but a good first draft would always be writing about something that touches your heart, and you have to communicate that to other people, right? Like आप MPH क्यों करना चाह रहे हो? What is it out of the MPH that you're trying to get? So for me, it was infection control.
Hmm.
It was infection prevention and control. And honestly, it has changed so much ever since I've come here and throughout the months. But to begin with, it was really good because that is something I was working on. So I think, and then I built this story. So when I was writing my essay, I was always building a story.
Yeah,
कि मेरी journey क्या है, मेरी MPH journey क्या है, मैं किस तरह MPH में आई. So that's how I started. However, I would say I was lucky enough to have people around me who were able to sort of redo those drafts for me. My sister went to Columbia. She writes exceptionally well. So I had her to uske hamesha se, and she's a lawyer as well. वो लिख लेती है.
oh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so there's that. So
yeah,
I would just send her like eventually when जब मुझे लगा कि अच्छा मैंने draft अच्छे करने शुरू हो गए तो I would just send her a draft and she would give me some feedback, and that's how. And it took me, मेरा पहला draft था I think Feb 2021, और
yeah,
फिर जो मैंने अपनी applications December, November,
yeah,
October उस time में submit करने शुरू की. So you can imagine like all those months I was just redoing the drafts.
all right, perfect. आपने ये देखा था कि कौन कौन से was your MPH program being a STEM programs a thought when you were applying?
Yes. So initially, I had this misunderstanding that an MPH in general is a STEM degree, which, as it turned out, it's not. It really depends on what you're. So within an MPH as well, there's a lot of different concentrations,
Concentrations.
a lot of different things that you can do with an MPH. Some of them, if they're like quantitative heavy, can count as STEM, but some of them don't.
Mostly
So
epidemiology and biostat programs are usually STEM programs, from what I've heard.
yes, yes, yeah. So if you're doing an MPH in epidemiology or biostatistics,
Yeah.
it is going to be STEM. But again, I'm not sure. So every university has
Every
like a
university is different. Yeah, you have to check that on your Common App.
like you can just like write them an email
Yeah.
and ask them if they'll let you know. Yeah.
All right.
I think another
How to
and I,
choose?
sorry, yeah, go.
Sorry, did I cut you off? मुझे लगता है आपकी आवाज
No,
कट
no,
गई.
no, that's fine. I was just gonna add the fact that what I liked about it in the process was how useful these universities are in getting back to you. So you just send them
My God,
emails.
I know, right? They get back to you in like
Yeah.
hours. You're
Yeah,
right. It's very crazy because people in Pakistan do not reply to emails. So it's very crazy when you see people replying to you.
it's a whole other world out here.
Yeah.
I was literally chilling with my dean at my dorm like before this call. So
Wow, that's all right. How to Dr. Batavar, how should one choose his or her concentration? Because there's so many concentrations और हर university की different होती हैं. How should one choose?
that's an interesting question. I honestly, I think so. The way I went about it was that whenever I was going to choose a concentration for a particular university, I would just quickly go through their website and see what their specific concentration was about,
Hmm.
and then see what were some of the courses that that particular concentration was offering, or the description of that
Yeah.
concentration was saying that resonated with me. It's not that it's I don't think it's not too hard and fast, but once you're in the university you can still
Yeah.
take some courses in a different concentration. You can even ask them to change your concentration. So at Harvard it's been tough to change your concentration. I'm very happy about mine now, but like I've realized that it's hard to change my concentration at Harvard. I don't know about other universities, but some of the universities were like flexible about it. I spoke to them before applying and they were like, yeah, just pick one. So every university has a very different criteria. For example, some universities look at all the applications, accept students, and then send them to their concentration.
Okay.
Some universities look have faculty from every different concentration that looks at applications coming to that
What does
concentration.
Harvard do?
So what Harvard does is that it has a different faculty for every different department, and that department looks at the applications that are coming to that specific concentration. So my concentration is global health. The reason
Yeah.
I applied at global health is because I was like, oh, so I bring a lot of South Asian context
Hmm.
on the table, and my application is going to stand out in the global health cohort, as opposed to applying for quantitative methods, which is I don't have any math background, and I do have a good GRE score, but I don't have, like, I've done pre-med and then I've done dentistry. So my application might not be as competitive as compared to some of the other people who'd be applying for, because a lot of people apply to NMPH. So
Yeah.
I think that was the reason I applied for global health at Harvard, because I thought it would increase my chances to get into the university.
But global health is not a STEM program, right?
Global health is not a STEM program. No.
And the disadvantage of not being STEM program is that you'll get an OPT of 1 year, right?
Yes. So after graduation, I have a year's visa
Hmm.
to work in the US without any sponsorship. With the STEM degree, you have a 3-year like work extension that you can work as much as you want in the US without
Alright. So
sponsorship.
ये आपका इसलिए था because you eventually might go on to do DDS, so it doesn't really matter if you get inshallah.
Honestly, not really. I think I wasn't too well aware of this fact that global health was not STEM. I think I realized it like at a very late stage. And when I was applying to Harvard, I did it in a bit of a rush. Again, when I was
But
applying
you
to
got into
Harvard,
Harvard, it doesn't matter.
when I was applying to Harvard and Johns Hopkins, I was just applying like, oh, it was. I had not, in my wildest imaginations, thought that I would get accepted into these universities. And I was joking with this friend of mine who was helping me sort of redo my resume and all. And he's like, Buktaber, like, imagine you getting into Harvard, and we would just laugh about it. I'd be like, I don't think that, like, okay, yeah, like one can dream, but yeah, no, it happens apparently.
It happened. All right. So once a person is done with public health in the United States, what's the job market like? Scope क्या है public health का in America?
Interesting. I think scope अच्छा है, ठीक है? Like, you can find this with a public health degree, you can do so much
So
and
much.
nothing at the same time. Like, you would have people who will tell you that public health is absolutely useless, iska kuch nahi ho sakta. And then there's going to be people who know how to. So everybody, like, mera jo cohort hai, honestly, global health is very dominated by doctors. So most of the people in my cohort are like medical doctors who are doing an MPH between their third and final year. So all of these people are going to go back to their final year of medical school, and they have that job, right? So unka MPH karne ka purpose hi aur hai. They're just adding another degree, and that's going to help them get into residency. So everybody does MPH for a different goal. There are people, for example, I have an architect in my class, and he has worked in the field of, he's like a very well-renowned architect from somewhere in Europe, I believe, and he's doing an MPH. So
Wow.
he already has a career. He's gonna go back to. We have civil servants from India. Like we have this guy called Praveen, and he has his own Wikipedia page. You can look it up. He's a civil servant at like a very high ranking civil servant in India. Like he's put a lot of Indian politicians in jail, and he was a medical doctor by background. So he's doing an MPH here. So
Wow.
MPH is a very interesting degree. I know that I want to do, my career goal is to do a DPS. So I'm going to do everything that I can after an MPH. But yes, if you're looking to do an MPH as a
Yeah.
career change from clinical dentistry, if you're trying to get out of clinical dentistry and do MPH, what you can do with your MPH is consulting is very popular. So you can work as a consultant. And what a consultant really does is that there's a lot of consulting firms in the US. They'll hire you to be a part of their team, and a consultant is usually like on a group project where you have clients and you do consulting work
Right.
for people. So there's that. Then you can work as a program manager with a non-profit organization. So the possibilities are endless. And when you come to a university, they have their career fairs and this
Yeah.
services office. So this just like right now, it's just been 2 months that I'm into this program, and because I had a bit of a late start, I haven't been able to like tap into that yet. But there's just so many opportunities. I don't know where to begin. Like looking for like that right job, because obviously I do need a job right out of school. So there's just so much you can do with an MPH, honestly.
All right, that completely answers my question. Acha, ab aapne you've been studying there for 2 months. Not a big sample size, but what differences have you felt in the education system over there and to begin with and
Yeah.
over here? Because whenever I've asked this question from some of my seniors, they're like, just how accommodating the professors are.
Yes.
So, what's your thought
That,
about it?
that is definitely one of the biggest. I would say one begin like it's not even before coming to the US. Because I got my hard acceptance at around in early Feb, I believe. So
Okay.
I've been to the university. So when you get your acceptances, the universities start holding these series of Zoom meetings with the potential students to convince them to come to the university. Not convince them, but like give them like a taste of what their university, because they know like anybody that they've offered an acceptance to, they're probably someone who has acceptance from like multiple other universities. So then they start holding these, Zoom sessions where they give you a taste of the university, classes, just get you acquainted to what their university is like. And the difference begins there, like how the amount of resources that the university is ready to put out there for you, the kind of support that they'll give you.
That's
and
amazing. Yeah.
and I think the universities had their goal is to make sure that your life is easy. They're not trying to make their life easy. They're trying to make your life easy. They're trying to do anything that they can so that your process is easier. They're here to help you succeed. So I think the difference that I've felt is that they put students here. Like they're like, where this is our job. Like our job is to make your life easier. Anything need to succeed in life, we're here to give that to you. And other than being like courtesy and humbleness,
Yeah.
those are enough things. But like academically speaking, they're like really driven to ensure that your time at the university doesn't get wasted. You're not wasting any time and you're getting the support that you need. And then after moving, I mean, okay, so my journey, even after my acceptance, was like really, it got really messed up, because when I applied for a student visa, I during the interview, it was pretty smooth. My visa got approved. But then 3 days later, I called them to collect my passport, and they tell me that my student visa has been put into administrative processing, which essentially means that they need to do some additional background checks on my case, and that it
God.
could take 2 to 3 months. And I'm like, I don't have that kind of time. I need to get to Boston in August. September, August, yeah, August. And anyway, so it was again like a whole other shit show, so to say, for the lack of a better word. And I was just like, and you can beep it or you can edit it out if you want, but it was it was not great. And I was literally at a point where I was actually going to defer my offer to next year until I had the visa, because I didn't have my visa. And then I got my visa like 5 days before the absolute deadline. So school had started, orientation was lost. I was still sitting in Pakistan.
Oh my God, you missed the orientation.
I missed the orientation because I didn't have a visa.
Oh my God.
It was bad. It was really
This is so
bad.
bad for you.
It was bad. I was
Having
so
a
bummed.
US visa is so important these days. I don't even like if you want to move to US, having a US visa is so we
Yeah.
applied for it, and after COVID, getting a US visa has been so difficult. I applied for the visa in 2020 December, and I got an interview date for December 2021, like a year later.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's crazy. The wait times right now are crazy. But yeah, I
It is.
completely must have been
It
very
is.
frustrating.
It was very, but what I was trying to say was that the university was very understanding in the
Yeah.
process. I was completely in touch with them. I felt like they were sadder than me about the fact that, I was going through all that I was going through. Like anytime I would meet them, I was still very optimistic, like, okay, it's okay, like I'll defer, I'll come next year. And they'd be like, why? Like, you should be a little. And I was like, I mean, I've had visit visa rejections in the past. I feel like I'm just not phased by it anymore, but they were really nice. And so I got my visa approved like for few days before their ad drop deadline, which is essentially a deadline that this is the time by which you need to get to the camp, like you need to be on campus, because if you're not, then they'll either like revoke your offer or they offer you to defer it a year.
Okay.
And so I got my visa and I'm talking to the university. I'm like, what do I do? They're like, we'll help you out, because I didn't have housing in Boston. They put me into one of the campus dorms, and they were really supportive about it. I didn't feel like I had any trouble with the university not accommodating me. They were very nice. The only problem with Harvard, I would say, is like anybody who wants to apply, is that they have this one thing that they don't really accommodate anybody with, which I found was like extremely challenging, is that so when you get your admission offer, it's expensive. Like it's really expensive. I did not have a lot of scholarship offer either. They offered to fund 25% of my tuition fee, which is honestly not a lot. There's still a lot of money that's involved. So what you have to do is that you have to show proof of funds, and for Harvard, that proof of funds needs to be in a dollars account in dollars. And when you're going to try to buy so many dollars from rupees, A, that's hard. And B, even if you have the money, buying dollars from Pakistan, so many, is not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
Like,
So how did you go about it? It's very difficult, you're right, and especially right now, it's too difficult.
it's too difficult. So God bless my brother. He's a smart guy. Both my siblings were able to, my sister being in the US, my brother living in Karachi. Both of them were able to figure out ways in which they managed that.
Okay.
But
In the end.
again, I couldn't say that it was easy, and it could have been a reason that I might have just missed
How
my.
how much of a time do they give you, iske beech mein, like between the acceptance and showing you?
So I got my acceptance in Feb, I believe. The timeline to decide what university you actually want to go to is around April. So they ask you for like a 500 saving your seat fee by April 1st. By then, I decided I wanted to come to Harvard, and then June for 1st June is your last date. I think 31st July or 1st June. Uh, 1st July or 31st June. 30th
One
June.
question that I've been thinking of asking: why didn't you go to John Hopkins?
That's a very interesting question. So, okay, so the way my acceptances started coming in was like I got into the state universities, then I got into Temple, then I got into Boston. When I got into Boston, that was done for me. Boston was top 10. I did not think I'd get into Columbia or Harvard or whatever. So I was like, Boston is where I'm going. And then I got my acceptance from Columbia University. And I was like, oh, okay,
And
maybe we're
Columbia's
going.
in New York, so
Columbia is in New York. My sister was there. So I started like planning to go to Columbia. And then I heard back from Harvard and I got in. And that was
what
like
was
a
it
whole.
like? What was it like when you got the? I want to hear the story.
The Harvard acceptance. It was
Yeah.
actually interesting. My parents were out of town. It was me. I was by myself at my place, and my cousin, one of my cousins, was actually staying with me, and another cousin from Pindi with her husband. They were visiting us.
Okay.
In Lahore. So it was me, another cousin who was staying with me, and the other cousin who was visiting from Pindi. And the three of us were sitting there, like we were having a chill dinner. And I get a message on my phone saying, "Oh, Harvard just posted your decision letter on the portal. So it's a portal that you have to log into." And I was like, oh, okay. So I just like quietly went, got my laptop. They don't know what I'm doing by this point. I just like quietly went, got my laptop, and I was like really nervous, like really nervous. And at the back of my head, I'm like, Bastavar, it's okay if you don't get in, like.
Yeah.
You going to Colombia, it's fine. Like, and this is not something that I have. But when I opened it, I read that. I read that acceptance check. Congratulations, you've been accepted. And I'm like, I was
You
just
see?
like, I was very overwhelmed. I just
Yeah, I
started
can
like, I
imagine.
was smirking and they're like, what's up? And I just like completely, I just shut my laptop down, like, guys, I got into Harvard. And by this point, both of them didn't know that I had applied because I just
Oh,
applied
yeah.
and they're like Harvard University. I was like, yeah, for an MBA. And they're like, what? And then they read my letter and we're just like jumping around. And then I have
Wow.
like a bunch of really close friends. So I knew like I needed to update people. So on my family group, like my parents and my siblings, I'm like, oh, I got accepted into Harvard. And then I'm sending, like telling all of my friends. And the funniest thing is like my mother doesn't even congratulate me. And the first thing she says is like, just brown parents, right? She's like, don't tell anyone yet.
Oh my God.
Like, mom, can you know? And she's like,
Oh my God, that's
because
the most typical brown thing your mom could have done. बेटा नजर ना लग जाए.
नहीं उन लोगों का तो मानना ही है कि तुम्हारे वीजा ही इसलिए लगते हैं क्योंकि तुम कुछ भी करने से पहले like I
सब
don't know if
कुछ
you
आ
know
देती हो.
पंजाबी
Oh
वर्ड
my
है
God, that's me. That's
like
me.
तुम ढोरा पीटना शुरू कर देती हो and I'm like I'm excited about it like I cannot help it like मैं क्या करूं and they're like किसी को नहीं बताते नजर लग जाती है देखा नहीं अभी तुम्हारे इतने वीजे रिजेक्ट हुए हर चीज तुम्हारी फंस जाती है नजर लग जाती है and I'm like and I'm not superstitious like that I'm like
I'm
नजर
same. Me neither. Same. Yeah.
I think नजर does not exist guys come out of it and they're
Oh
like
my God. You know, I can show you a message right now. Just 6 hours ago, I मेरे एक दोस्तों का group है with 7 other friends of mine, and they were discussing Nazar, and I just said that there's no such thing as Nazar, and they all attacked me that
yeah
no, there is Nazar, there is Nazar, there is Nazar, blah blah blah
पर
blah blah.
पाकिस्तान में आप नहीं आप पाकिस्तान में ऐसे नहीं कह सकते कि नजर नहीं होती है बिकॉज सब समझेंगे आप पागल हैं
Thank
so
you
I'm
so
just
much. I am so happy because literally 6 hours ago I was having this conversation with my friends that Nazar does not exist.
I agree with you there
You know
is
what? I give this very good example, and actually my sister gives this example as well. If Nazar existed, Kylie Jenner and Kendall Jenner wouldn't be this rich.
या अच्छा और ये तो ना मैं तो जाती हूँ like I get very I don't know like मैं बड़े गलत तरीके से इसको not गलत I think it's a very effective way of teaching क्योंकि ना फिर ये लोग ले आते हैं बातें मेरे साथ religion की so I'm always like oh so if you're saying nazar exists does that mean कि तुम लोगों को लोगों के उस पे ज्यादा अल्लाह पे भरोसा नहीं है I'm like you don't have enough faith in God to know that people don't have an influence over your life I'm
You know
like
what's वो मैं इसी तरह का आर्ग्यूमेंट देता हूँ जो वो कहते हैं कि ये इस्लाम में है नजर. What argument I give is that इस्लाम में ये भी है कि जो होता है अच्छे के लिए होता है.
हाँ
तो
हाँ
या तो इस चीज को मानो कि नजर
yeah
लग रही है तो वो चीज नहीं हो रही तो इट्स अ बैड थिंग, या इस चीज को मानो कि ये हो रहा है तो अच्छे के लिए हो रहा है. अगर कोई चीज आपको मिल गई है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल यू गॉट इनटू हार्वर्ड, अल्लाह ना करे
yeah
कुछ मसला हो जाता, इट
yeah
प्रॉब्लली हमारी बिलीफ यही है एज मुस्लिम दैट कि अल्लाह के
yeah
कुछ बेहतरी होगी, ठीक है,
yeah
या ये
yeah
कहने की नजर नजर लग गई. तो दो
it's
contradicting statements हैं. So I completely see. Oh my
yeah
God, I love this. Thank you so much for bringing this up. This
but so I
nazar.
was like हाँ भाई नजर को छोड़ो साइड पे I told my cousins and then we were jumping around so it was I was happy like I was in a very different state of mind like a
I
very
am
high
sure.
happy state of mind for the next week
Did
or
you get
so
into Emory?
I got into Emory yes
So
I
you
got into Emory
basically got into every college that you applied to, mashallah se.
I
Or
actually
that,
I applied to Yale as well I think Yale was the only university I got waitlisted at
why? Yale is like
I don't know
14th or 12th, I think.
which is why I wasn't like I was like okay like
उनको
whatever
वो क्यों शौक है हो रहे थे? All right, so that's an extremely inspirational story, Dr. Bakhtavar. We're moving towards the end. Although I'm really enjoying this conversation. What are some of the things that these universities, Harvard, Emory, अब आप क्योंकि उधर हैं, what are some of the things that these universities look for in an applicant? Just if you could list a few things down.
I think from my experience, what they're looking for is someone who is passionate about public health, who's definitely done something in public health, who's made a difference. I think coming here, I've realized there's a lot of people in Pakistan who are doing some great public health work. Without a doubt, I think all of them can like be here. I had this friend, Haris Khole. I think a lot of people know
Yeah,
him.
yeah, I know. I've interviewed him at the podcast as well.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't seen. Show me. Send me the link of that podcast. I'm gonna watch it. Yeah. So like, I think they're looking for people like that who understand how public health works, who are passionate about doing work here, work in the public health sector, and then I think a huge part of it is if you know the art of presenting all that you know and all that you do in a good application, like write a good SOP, know how to do your resume right.
I feel that is so important, writing a good SOP, because a CV hobby, if you don't package it well, I feel like it's so important.
And also even CV, there's a certain way of like यहाँ पे आके मैं अपनी CV अब ठीक करनी शुरू किया. So I think these are a lot of resources that we don't have back in Pakistan. Like we don't have that kind of guidance, especially in dentistry, like MBA लेवल पे या IBA लम्स इन जगहों पे ये चीजें सिखाते हैं. डेंटल स्कूल्स में ये चीजें नहीं सिखाते हैं. Especially if you want to come to an MPH, I would say connect with your friends who went to business school, who went to law school, who went to all of these schools, who
Yeah.
know the art of making a CV or writing a personal statement. And I think so having done good public health work, some work I didn't have any research, so like don't let not having any publication or any research work hold you back. If you're interested in something related to public health work, do some work in it, do volunteer work in it, put a good application together, have people go through your application who are in the process. More than happy to leave my email, reach out to me, reach out to anybody that you can get a hold of. And I think it's it's not too hard to get into these schools.
Perfect. All right. Second last question. Where do you see yourself going in the next coming years? अगले एक दो तीन साल में, where do you see yourself going? I know it's a very personal question, but just overview कि आपका क्या goal होगा, कि अब आपने क्या करना है आगे? Because your
Honestly,
global health is 1 year, right? It's a 1 year.
global health.
Yeah.
So I think one of the lessons that I've learned in life, especially after graduation, is that I'm not too attached to any goals anymore. Like I have a plan, but again, I don't attach myself to those plans too rigidly. The plan right now is to get done with my MPH, find a job that's going to root me in the country, and in the process, get done with my boards, get into a DDS, do a DDS, and then build a career that's both clinical, but at the same time sort of keeps me in the public health sector. I really enjoy administrative work. But again, who knows? I might find a really great job just as an MPH and I'd really start enjoying it. And I would feel like it's making me decent money as well. And I might not want to go back to clinical dentistry. But at this point, I'm very, very, very open to all kinds of opportunities that I think
That's
will.
a brilliant mindset to have. All right. Last question. What do you think about the startup of ours, and any advice that you would like to give us?
I am so happy about this initiative that you've taken.
Thank you
Every
so much.
I think it's through your podcast that so many people are going to get so much guidance. I think very actually I think if I can remember it correctly, initially when I started doing my MPH sort of browsing, it was a podcast of yours that I came across, which is when I sort of starred you at a side. You had interviewed this person who was probably from an engineering school who was doing some work in public health and oral health. It was like one of your very first podcasts. I don't know if you remember or not,
No, I
but it was a
remember.
woman. It was a woman who was an engineer and who was working in the oral health field, and she done
Oh,
something.
Dr. Varda Enam.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's who
Yeah,
she
yeah,
is.
she's the CEO of Overjet.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
She
So
works
I
in
think
Boston. She actually might just be living very close to you. She's
I'm actually going to look her up and try to connect with
definitely,
her.
because she's an amazing person. She's
Yeah.
मतलब she's top 100 women leaders में भी अभी वो आई हैं. She's doing amazing work, and her startup Overjet. I'm actually working for her for the startup for the past 2 years. It's an artificial intelligence company. It's actually not
Yeah.
public health. You might have missed that, but it's an artificial intelligence company that's doing work in dental diagnosis and wo. And I've set up a team in Pakistan for them. So yeah, the work they're doing is amazing. And
So
you should definitely connect with her, because I know she lives in Boston and she loves meeting Pakistanis.
oh, I would definitely love to meet her. I'm always looking for Pakistanis. There's a lot of Indians here. I haven't like come across too many
Really?
Pakistanis.
You haven't?
Dude, there's a whole bunch of Indians at
Yeah.
Harvard. There's like very few Pakistanis. But
Oh, that's
again,
amazing.
I think maybe like a smaller population as well. But no, so I was saying that these podcasts, I think they have such a huge impact. I mean, people who are at times looking for the kind of help that they want, especially being from Pakistan. And podcasts like these really help them, like, oh, like this person could like lead me to where I want to. So I think you guys are doing some amazing work. I just love the energy and the enthusiasm you
Thank you
have.
so much, Dr. Bhutavar. Thank you
And
so much.
best of luck for everything ahead.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhutavar, for taking time out. Honestly, it meant so much to me. I really enjoyed this conversation. मुझे personally बहुत सीखने को मिला. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
I really
Uh,
thanks so much for doing this. Thanks so much for having me.
no, no problem. And thank you so much. Take care and hope to see you soon sometime.